Greedy in-app purchases may destroy Pokémon GO. This is probably my most important video essay to date, mainly because a lot of my favorite game franchises are starting to get completely derailed as a result of developer greed. Mario Kart Tour, Pokémon Masters, Pokémon GO, pretty much every Nintendo licensed mobile game has one huge criticism behind them right now. All of these games have greedy monetization practices. When it comes to Pokémon GO specifically, many players have started to show their frustrations toward Niantic, but I actually wonder if they are the real culprits. I see a very common theme cropping up among all Nintendo mobile games, so I wonder if it's actually Nintendo that we have to worry about. Regardless, Pokémon GO is starting to go down a path that I never wanted to see it travel. With some of the more recent design choices by Niantic and with some upcoming new features, it seems like this game is going to benefit those who choose to spend money a lot more than those who choose to play the game for free. It's pretty common nowadays that big AAA publishers like EA, Activision Blizzard, Bethesda, and 2K are suffering from unfavorable reputations from the consumer. This is of course because blatantly greedy pay-to-win mechanics and unnecessary paywalls litter their mobile and console games. What we are starting to see is Nintendo following suit rather than being the gold standard for other companies to follow. This is troubling, with games like NBA 2K20, Fallout 76, Battlefield, Call of Duty, Anthem, World of Warcraft, and Star Wars Battlefront 2. All of these franchises are on a steep decline in popularity, and the primary reason for that is consumer distrust, publisher greed, and pushback against these egregious monetization practices. Now look, I'm not saying that a free-to-play game should be completely barred from monetizing their games. I completely agree with the notion that if players want to support the developer of a game with their money, then they should be able to do so. But monetization is a very fine line, one that most game developers seldom tread lightly. My hope is that for a game like Pokémon GO, one that has amassed great financial success from non-predatory practices, continues pushing better monetization practices and doesn't fall down the sinkhole of publisher greed. But before we get into all of that, if you end up enjoying this video essay, make sure you share it with your friends, hit that like button, subscribe if it's your first time here, and if you want to support my channel financially, consider becoming a patron on Patreon. There is a link to it in the description below. Alright, let's jump right into it. First, let's talk about who would be at fault if Pokémon GO were to go full EA level greed, because I think it's important to start the discussion by indicating who deserves the criticism, Nintendo or Niantic. Now, I have to be clear, my aim is not to create a negative stigma around either Nintendo or Niantic, but we do have to point out these issues. Both of these companies have done tremendous amounts of work to provide their players with a very positive gaming experience, and we have to give credit where credit is due. But regardless, we need to call out either of them if things get too bad. When it comes to any perceived unfair monetization mechanics within Pokémon GO, I certainly believe players will tend to blame Niantic more than Nintendo. Let's take a look at why this is. While Nintendo and Game Freak could pressure Niantic into ludicrous monetization schemes, it's ultimately Niantic who makes the design decisions. And if we look at their design decisions up until now, you can certainly point out how they have used RNG and FOMO to build up a stupid amount of revenue. Now, regardless if you are free to play, casual, or hardcore, you cannot deny the fact that if you want the absolute best of the best IVs of some of the most powerful Pokemon, or if you want super rare shinies that you can only get through raids and egg hatches, then you will need to grind out a ridiculous amount. And if you want to raid and hatch eggs at a ridiculous amount, well, you will be absolutely required to spend money. At a rate of 50 Pokecoins a day from gym battles, which is of course Pokémon GO's only free-to-play method for getting premium currency, you simply will not have enough to get the exorbitant amount of raid passes and incubators necessary to grind out for those shinies and hundos. I think it goes without saying that Pokemon GO's version of loot boxes is none other than eggs. If you want specific super rare Pokemon that you normally wouldn't be able to find in the wild, or if you want certain shinies that don't exist elsewhere, then you will be required to hatch eggs, and hatch a mindlessly large number of them within a small time frame. This all started coming to a head with the most recent egg hatching event, where players who wanted shinies for regional Pokemon were required to hatch an insane number of eggs within a short window of time. Meanwhile, they suddenly reduced the number of super incubators from Ultra Boxes in the in-game store, which meant players had to spend even more money than they normally would in order to get the results that they were looking for, which in and of itself was not guaranteed because of the unnecessarily low shiny rates. This truly upset a good portion of the player base. Another aspect that has seemingly gone unnoticed is with shiny legendaries. Of course, if you want a shiny Mewtwo or a shiny Giratina, you will be required to raid a ridiculous amount of these raid bosses, and this has been a common theme when it comes to the release of shiny legendaries. It's not guaranteed for anyone, and if you want to increase your chances at getting one of these within the short time window that you have, then you will need to spend money on raid passes. It's just kind of a given. On top of all of this, it looks like Niantic is gearing up to introduce paid in-game events. The recent addition of the event ticket means Pokemon GO will have paywalled in-game events just like what they have in Ingress Prime, something that was met with huge disdain from the Ingress community. So with all of this, is Niantic the main culprit? Is Pokemon GO too pay to win and Niantic's greed causing the game's downfall? Well, no. No, it's not. At least, not yet. Let me explain. It may sound like I'm vilifying Pokemon GO's developers, but actually I want to present the case that Pokemon GO's monetization is actually not as egregious as many would think it is, but rather it's on the path of becoming completely egregious due to Nintendo's current trajectory. In other words, Pokemon GO isn't fully there yet. It might seem like it is, but I don't believe it actually is. It's certainly getting closer and closer, but it's not there yet. I think most people don't give Niantic as much credit as they deserve. While Niantic greed has certainly been a hot topic issue as of late, I honestly think the sentiment towards Niantic has been the opposite for pretty much the entirety of Pokemon GO's lifetime. You might disagree with me, but seriously, let's take a hard look at how Pokemon GO is. Now, what are the main driving points for a player to spend money in Pokemon GO? What are the key items that players are spending their Pokecoins on? That's right, raid passes and incubators. If you are spending Pokecoins on anything else, you are essentially wasting your money. Sure, lucky eggs, incense, and lure modules do hold significant value, but these are essentially unnecessary. Raid passes and incubators are where it's at. However, because of the market share nature of Pokemon GO with its trading system, it is ultimately not necessary to buy an insane amount of incubators and raid passes if you want a particular shiny or a perfect IV. Thanks to lucky friendships and a robust trade economy, it's actually quite simple to get certain Pokemon that you need or want without spending a single dime. On top of that, this game is completely luck based. It doesn't matter if you are hardcore or a complete casual. The game can still be rewarding to almost any player. You could be someone who rarely ever spends money in the game and walk out with dozens of 100% IV legendaries and shinies. You could be someone who spends hundreds, if not thousands of dollars in the game and barely have even one hundo legendary. I've seen it myself. Some would say that this is a deep negative with the game, but it's actually what makes it quite fair. Everyone has a chance at getting something good, and spending money is not a requirement for getting good Pokemon. Now there is a small caveat with this entire system, and that's exclusive and legacy moves. If you want a particular Pokemon with an exclusive or a legacy move, well, these Pokemon are in limited supply, so if you did not spend the money for raid passes in order to get these particular Pokemon on a raid day, there is a chance you could miss out. But it seems like Niantic is still re-releasing old Pokemon with exclusive moves, as evident with the Lapras Raid Day, or they are providing powerful alternatives to past Pokemon's legacy moves, such as with Lick Gengar. On top of that, most Pokemon with exclusive and legacy moves are available without any requirement to spend money. And of course I'm talking about the monthly Community Day events. So to say that exclusive moves are a method for Niantic to greedily exploit their consumer base is kind of a weak argument, and I know I've made that argument on my channel before. So at the top of this video, I mentioned how Nintendo and not Niantic could be the reason why Pokemon GO is getting more and more egregious with its monetization. And I recognize for that for the past 8 or 9 minutes or so, I was specifically talking about Niantic. So how is Nintendo the company that we should be worried about? So as much as Niantic is the creators of Pokemon GO, Nintendo is ultimately the one company who has full creative control over the Pokemon franchise. That means if Nintendo goes down the route of EA, Activision Blizzard, Bethesda, etc., then Niantic has to follow suit or else they risk losing the license. Regardless of how you feel about Niantic, remember that it is ultimately Nintendo that calls the shots with Pokemon GO. If Nintendo wants to make any changes or updates to the game, it is more likely than not that they have to get Nintendo's blessing before it's implemented. I mean, this was kind of confirmed with Niantic's most recent job posting, where as a game designer, you will be required to work with outside parties. This indicates to me that you do need to work with Nintendo, and as they put it, you have to keep the integrity of the game's license. So what exactly does this mean? If Nintendo wants Pokemon GO to generate more revenue, even though Pokemon GO is already generating tons of revenue, then they are going to put their foot down on Niantic. If we start to see egregious monetization practices creep into Pokemon GO, like we've been seeing recently, then we have to consider the possibility that it is Nintendo making those decisions. With their current track record with other mobile games, without a doubt, Nintendo could be the culprit. Now look, I think it goes without saying that nobody wants to see Pokemon GO become a monetization-riddled mess that only caters to pay-to-win players and completely neglects free-to-play players. Some would argue that the game is already in that state, but I would actually disagree. The game is certainly still playable and enjoyable for anyone who wants to spend little to no money in the game. Plus, if you compare Pokemon GO's current state compared to other games that are in the market, Pokemon GO is relatively tame when it comes to in-app purchases. I think if we want to keep the integrity of Pokemon GO intact, then we have a responsibility as players to hold Nintendo and Niantic accountable. Whenever there is something greedy that is implemented, then we have to speak out against it. If Niantic wants to hold a higher standard while still making a mountain of revenue, then we have to make sure they stay there. Support Niantic with your money in areas that are justified and fair. Don't spend money in areas which you deem as unfair. Beyond complaining on social media or Reddit, the strongest voice we have as players is with our wallets. If we see Niantic or Nintendo go the route of EA, Activision Blizzard, Bethesda, and all those other AAA game studios, then the only way we can change that is not spend money. Showing restraint whenever a game studio does something predatory is the best way for them to fix their ways. Look, I truly hope it doesn't come down to that, but Niantic has been walking a fine line lately. I truly hope they continue to see the merits of their previous monetization systems, and they don't succumb to any sort of greed or pressure from Nintendo. I really think as long as we hold them accountable, we will have a fair and justified monetization system for the foreseeable future. Hey guys, before I leave, I have to give a little bit of a spiel. I mean, when it comes to the YouTube algorithm, it's extremely difficult to gauge how successful you can be on YouTube. Like, there are some times where I have a ton of views on my videos, and there are some days where I just have no views on my videos, and it really comes down to the YouTube algorithm. And there's a lot of times where I get dinged for some of the songs that I pick or some of the footage that I show, and unfortunately it's because YouTube's copyright system is a little bit broken. But if you want to support this channel financially, I highly suggest you check out my Patreon. A link to it is in the description below. Your support definitely helps me out, and it helps support this channel because I would love to crank out more videos and increase the quality, and for that to happen, I do need your help. So definitely go and check out that link. And yeah, big shout out and big thank you to all of you for supporting my channel. I hope you enjoyed this video, everyone. If you did, make sure you smash that like button, subscribe if it's your first time here, and don't forget that little bell as well. Check out the links in the description below. I'm Count Jinsula, and I'll catch you all later.